Welcome to episode 496 of Cinematary. I am your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Grace Winburn.
Outcycle O'Malley.
We got Michael Outcycle O'Malley, who's outside, and
there's a plane flying over my head right now.
It's great audio. This is perfect for this audio medium.
Absolutely.
We got a jam-packed episode for you. We got movies we saw this week, and it's, it feels like, I was telling them before we started recording, it feels like we haven't podcasted in like a year, even though it was only a couple of weeks. But we knocked out the Chungking Express episode so far ahead of the actual record, the published date, that it feels like it's been so long since we've done this. So I'm excited to be back in. But we got a bunch of new releases. We got even an Oscar winner we're going to talk about. And then we're going to be continuing our Cinematary Re-Do series with 1933's Duck Soup, including some clips from episode 147 of Cinematary, where we got some good Andrew quotes. I'm bummed he's not here to listen to him in person. But let's go ahead and jump in. I know Michael also saw Mickey 17, so let's talk a little bit about that. Mickey 17, real quick, is the latest from Bong Joon-ho. It's his Oscar blank check movie after he won the Oscar for Parasite.
Boy, is it a blank check movie.
It is a blank check movie. But Mickey 17, it follows Mickey Barnes, who finds himself in the extraordinary circumstance of working for an employer who demands the ultimate commitment to the job, to die for a living, which is not a great log line. It's set in this sci-fi future. You have a billionaire megalomaniac who is taking a group of people to a secluded planet, and one of the jobs is being the expendable. And it's no, we're not talking about Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. We're talking about Robert Pattinson just dying over and over again as they explore this planet, and then they reprint him out of this little printing machine. That's kind of funny. But you got Robert Pattinson, you have Naomi Aki, you have Stephen Yeun, Mark Ruffalo, Toni Collette. It's a good cast. But Michael, what did you think of Mickey 17?
There's a lot going on in this movie. I don't think from the trailer, or maybe even the first 30 minutes of the movie, you would guess where this eventually ends up. And when I said it was a blank check movie, it feels like it's adapted from a novel that I've not read. Mm-hmm. So it's possible that this is just kind of endemic in the source material. But it feels like that this was an attempt to shove as many ideas as you could think of into a movie. And in some regards, it resembles like Snowpiercer or Okja.
Or even The Host.
Or even The Host, where there's a heavy foregrounding of like slapstick and like really almost like absurd performances from stars. Okja has like Jake Gyllenhaal doing something kind of wacky. Snowpiercer has many people doing something wacky. Tilda Swinton comes to mind, and Mickey 17 has many wacky performers in it, and they're all kind of at the same sort of strange register, where they're all kind of satirical, but all kind of also just goofy. I think it's maybe underrated, like how funny goofy maybe Bong Joon-ho can be. Memories of Murder, which I guess was kind of his Western breakout film, that's full of like weird slapstick in the midst of like a police procedural, right? And I think that this movie is maybe the fullest like gung-ho it is into that sort of goofiness and, interest in doing slapstick. Like there's a lot of humor made from the printing machines, because you're like, you die, or Robert Pattinson dies, and then he gets printed out of this machine that looks like kind of an MRI machine, but you're going out of it instead of in. And like, there's like a montage of gags of him like coming out of this machine as the like technicians are like variously distracted while he's being printed out. And that's funny. Robert Pattinson himself is really funny because he's doing this kind of like funny, like nebbish voiced character. But then there's another copy of himself, which is like revealed in the trailer. I don't feel like it's too much of a spoiler. Who is like more of like an alpha male type guy, and Mickey 17 kind of gets like cuckolded by himself, which is also very funny. Like there's a lot of, I'm saying all this stuff that I think is really funny and entertaining about the movie. Toni Collette and Mark Ruffalo are also in this movie, and I think that they're a little bit more of a mixed bag, but they also have some really funny bits too. Mark Ruffalo is the aforementioned like billionaire. He's like a senator who failed to get reelected, and so he's like taking his cult of personality and is going to Interstellar, and
which is kind of I think Tired is saying it's a Donald Trump impression. I think Wired is saying it's like a Jim Baker impression.
Well, yeah, he's got the televangelist thing. He's got a program that they run, I guess, like closed circuit TV in the spaceship. I'm not exactly sure like what it is, but it is very much like a Jim Baker sort of thing. And he does. I do think it is kind of a Trump impression too, though. But it does have that televangelist energy as well. But some of that stuff is really funny. Like he's obsessed with like efficiency and like specifically like caloric efficiency, right? Like in space, you don't want to use up too many calories because it's going to use too many resources on the ship. And so like he like forbids sex on the spaceship. And while he's doing so, it's like intercut with Mickey 17 having sex with I forget the character's name that Naomi Nasha is playing. Nasha, yeah. And Toni Collette is just like hyper fixated on sauces, like the food, like for some reason, and views that as like the thin blue line between chaos and civilization is the sauce blue line. Anyway, I thought that was all funny. When I think about the movie as a whole, though, my head kind of hurts because it's just, I don't know. I don't feel like it really coheres. Like it is wild. It goes in wildly divergent directions. I don't know that all of this stuff gets tied together. A lot of the stuff that I've mentioned that was funny doesn't really have a satisfying arc. Like the sexual tension with his clone. Like at one point, it seems like that's going to be a big thing, and then it's kind of dropped. The sauce thing never really pays off. It's just like a goofy thing. I'm not sure.
It's a lot of which I'm sure we'll talk about later on in the episode, but it's a lot of like bits that come up that are pretty funny, but then they don't really land anywhere.
Well, and in fact, the whole third act of the movie takes a pivot into basically like Okja territory, where we have like cute CGI animals, and there's like this kind of environmentalist message that's also like pasted together with a colonialism message, because these animals are sentient and have the ability to communicate. Anyway,
I don't know. It's a good time. Yeah, it's like I had a good time with it. It is a little bit all over the place. It's giving you these messages in the third act that I don't really feel like it earns. It kind of is trying to balance all these different things, and I agree. Like there are a lot of bits that are like really funny, and like a lot of them like include Robert Pattinson, but for whatever reason, like they keep kind of taking him out of the driver's seat, and you're just like, just let him kind of like go. I think the closest comparison I can make is Okja, which like to your point from before, it's a movie with a bunch of recognizable movie stars that is just kind of them really going 150% into a character, and that's kind of fun. But at the end of it, you're just kind of like, it doesn't really stick with you. I don't think this is I really didn't like Okja. This one stuck with me a little bit more than Okja, but at the same time, I don't know. I think it's I applaud Bong Joon-ho. Like he's like, I'm gonna go for my wacky one. Like I won an Oscar, screw y'all. I'm gonna do one for me. I respect that, but yeah, this one's just it's a messy movie.
I actually feel kind of the opposite of you, because I thought Okja, I think I like better than this one, because as kind of wacky and undisciplined the storytelling can be in Okja, there is a through line which remains consistent throughout that movie, which is like the girl and her relationship with the pig thing, whatever Okja's called, I can't remember. Whereas in this one, it doesn't ever stick on a thread, and so like by the end of the movie, there are these bits that are or beats that are supposed to be like emotionally resonant, but they've not developed these beats. Like, it leans kind of hard at certain times into the romance between Mickey 17 and Nasha. And a big part of near the ending has to do with Nasha like kind of standing up for the rights of Mickey 17 to exist, and that she is in love with him and in love with him in all of his permutations throughout the printing process. And that's like a big thing because there's this kind of like cloning ethics question that comes up, but that's not been a thread throughout the film. Like that's been like something that they like touched on and then like dropped for like 45 minutes and then it comes back up again. So I think like for me, the scattershotness might work a little better if there was like a single thing that I could hold on to as like, okay, as wacky as this movie gets, this is the main thing that's happening. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the movie ever quite lands on that. I'm like you though. Good for Bong Joon-ho. Also, burn Warner Brothers money. Like, I don't know how financially successful this movie's going to be, but Warner Brothers deserves to take a bath on this.
Everybody got paid. It was a good time. But Mickey 17, it's still in theaters. Oh, it's a fun time. It's a good movie. I have a movie I might talk about later that I would recommend more going to see in the movie theater, but this one's still good. All right, I want to talk real briefly about No Other Land, which won the documentary best documentary at the Oscars. For those unfamiliar with No Other Land, it's a film that was made by a Palestinian activist named Basil Adra, who lives in the West Bank, and or specifically in the West Bank in Masar Yatta, as well as a Israeli journalist named Yuval Abraham, who is sympathetic to the Palestinian cause and has like come there because this Basil Adra has become very like notable because of his online presence and what he's documenting on Twitter and other places of his town in the West Bank. And it starts out with the Israeli military coming to one of the villages in the region. And they've declared that they are taking over this land to use it for military training. And it starts with them just bringing giant cars and construction equipment and just tearing down this village. And people have a little time to get out, but not much, as people are like rushing out of the homes as they just start like ripping them apart. And it opens in that, and at this point, it's taking place in 2019. And a bit of the kicker of this movie is that it started filming in 2019, and it stopped they finished the movie completely in October 2023. And so a lot of the stuff that you see that's just terrible and harrowing and unimaginable until you see it. A lot of that stuff's happening before October 7th and what took place after that. And so it's only like you can't even imagine what both of these people are dealing with at this point, especially a lot of the family that you meet. Basil, his father was, his mother and father were activists, still activists, but like, they were very active when they were younger, especially when he was growing up. And it very much kind of documents his struggle as the Israeli government continues to not only like tear down villages, but also like threaten his life and his family's life and other people's life. He's kind of the main person that you follow. There's also a man who was part of one of their protests who is shot by an Israeli soldier and is paralyzed from the neck down. And you follow him as he's trying to recover, but the Israelis don't give him access to an ambulance or a hospital. And so his mother and father are taking care of him in this cave that they've had to move to because their village was destroyed. And it's one of those movies at the IPH, they had a screening of this, and then they had a talk back with a number of Palestinian people talking about their experience with this. And it's a just as a documentary, it's interesting to kind of consider. It's one of those where I always struggled with this with documentaries. It's kind of like, if it's a topic that you're sympathetic to, like, is the documentary actually good, or is it just kind of verifying your perspective? And so you're like, that was really good because it kind of just verified what I already thought. And I struggle with that a lot of the times with documentaries, but this one I think is not only just like it not only, it doesn't really verify, it like opens your perspective, because a lot of the stuff you hear about in the news, but you don't, this time you're like actually seeing it. A lot of the movies not shot with, like, they have cameras that they're using, but a lot of the movie is shot with like cell phones and iPhone videos and like live streams that Basil and other people have been shooting while they're confronting Israeli soldiers and things like that. And to me, like, you have this narrative in place, and I think it kind of, the narrative follows, it follows through, but at the same time, it also is just this, it's one of those documentaries that's just very much like opening your eyes to something that much more vividly than kind of what you filter through the news or through your social media feeds or things like that. You get so many different like perspectives that are all like coming all different ways, and this is very like, to me, very clear cut. Like, it's not, there's no black and white in this. It's, there's a scene later on in the movie where they're having to funnel these children out of an elementary school because the soldiers are moving the equipment up the hill and they're going to take down this elementary school. And they're like, the kids are trying to grab stuff, and they're just like, we got to go. Like, we don't have time to grab like your toys and things like that. And then they just start, hitting the school. And it's just, I don't know. It's really tough. It's really unimaginable. It's really, I think it makes you really uncomfortable. Less like where you sit in terms of the war, but more just the stuff you're seeing, and the fact that it has this that's this verite style. Like, you're seeing it as it happens, and you're just seeing how these people are being treated, and in no way like it's being mimed for the cameras or anything. It's really hard. I'm really glad it won. I'm glad that Basil and Yuval got that stage at the Oscars to be able to speak their message. I mean, it's, for me, like, it really, not that I was like on the fence or anything, but it really clarified kind of what's happening and who is in the wrong here and who's not in the wrong. It's pretty, I don't see how you could watch that and be like, well, there's nuance. It's like, no, it's a very unnuanced movie. It's very straightforward. Right now, it's the other thing that's kind of well known about it is that it's undistributed. It played at the IPH. They brought it there and had this talk back and everything. And it's playing places like, a theater can pick it up like individually and it seems like and play it, because it's not getting any distribution. So you're not going to be able to find it on like a streaming service or anything like that. But yeah, I really recommend people taking the time to kind of experience that. I think not only just like to gain a better understanding of what Palestinian people are going through right now, but also just kind of engaging with that much more. Like, this is at the core of it, it's a human story, and it's about Basil and his family, and kind of in all the relationship between him and Yuval is really interesting, in how they, there's a scene very early on in the movie where Yuval is kind of frustrated because he thought like something that happened was going to forward the cause. And Basil's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, I thought like that would happen. And he's like, do you think like the conflict's going to get solved in like a week? And he's like, no, but like, I thought it would like and he's like, no, like, it's just, you keep clawing away, it's not, you're not going to get, there's no instant gratification in this. It's just kind of, he's like, you do it and you hope that later it has a ripple effect later on, but he's like, a lot of this we're just doing because we have to, and that's the only way to like make them listen. And it's tough. And so I think that message and just the very human approach that Basil takes is impactful. So No Other Land, I would recommend folks see it if they're able to, and really engage with that because it's very powerful. Now that I've sucked all the air out of the podcast, Grace, do you want to take over?
All right. Key change. That sounds like a wonderful movie. I look forward to seeing it whenever and wherever I can. In the meantime, I went and I saw The Monkey. I have said before on here, when I saw Longlegs, I was very scared. I will own that. Longlegs frightened me. I think that Oz Perkins is talented and can direct the hell out of a movie, and at least for me, for an audience of one. But this most recent film, The Monkey, starring Theo James, Tatiana Maslany, and some other folks. I don't know the names of the two child actors, but it follows these two twin brothers as they navigate severe and tragic loss in their lives. These major milestone, or these, key figures in their life, their mother, their father, they try to grapple with life, death, and mortality at the hands of this evil toy monkey that they have found in their mother's collection of their father's lingering belongings. This monkey seems to possess the power to kill anyone at random, anyone, anywhere, ever, but it seems to be the people that are in closest proximity to the two brothers. So with that being said, these deaths that happen, they are over the top. They're cranked up to 11 and camped to the max. It's all a joke. I really enjoyed this movie. It made me laugh, first of all. Hysterical. Here's a horror comedy that does both so well. But it really leans into the absurdity of these deaths, where it's like, it doesn't matter really how these people die. They're dead. So what can we do to sort of punch up that? And then the display of how they die is the most interesting thing about the death, because let's face it, it's not very interesting. Like, death is not very interesting. This has such an interesting approach to death. I think that I am a death obsessed person, a morbid person. I think that certainly comes from perhaps like any sort of organized religion. You're constantly thinking about your own mortality and where do you go from here, and what is this life and what is the next one. So then to have a movie that's sort of, what does it matter? Just this sort of this like nihilistic approach to death, and from like a child's perspective, it really leans into this like adolescent approach of death, of none of it matters or everything matters. The first half of the film is told in flashback, so I think that a lot of the narration is also perhaps skewed from like a child's perspective. Maybe some of these deaths are like blown out of proportion, because that's just how this kid or these children who have never really interacted with life because they're so young, then how do they really interact with death at such a young age? It's also skewed. So it could be that is affecting the proportion of these deaths, and then to lose so much family back to back to back to back, it starts to weigh on them. And the two brothers try to exert some control over death. How can you do that? You can't control it. It just happens, and it's just like life. Life is like death, and death is like it plays on these sort of the duality of life and death, the complications of life versus death. And it's, for me, I'm not a, philosophical person in any respect. I really don't think so. Maybe I am, maybe I guess that's for, more intelligent minds than mine to really sort of suss out for me. But I say that I don't live in theory, I live in reality. So, but that's neither here nor there. But following this movie, I found myself pretty moody because I was thinking about death and what does it mean? Does it really mean nothing? Following the movie, I also saw where Osgood Perkins talked about like his relationship to death, having lost both his father, Anthony Perkins, and then his mother. His father, I believe he lost him while he was very young, and then he lost his mother when he was in his mid-20s. And he said that at that point he felt buried. There was no life, there was no death. How do you go on? And I think that his proximity and his experience with death most certainly colors and informs this meditation on life and death. Also, it's got these really hilarious lines and bits. There's more payoff. You guys were talking about Mickey 17 and these bits that don't really land. I think that there's more payoff to just about all the humor in this, and I can see it, being, up there with, maybe somewhere in the middle between like Evil Dead and then like Tucker Dale versus Evil, like kind of in that realm of like culty horror comedies that just improve with each viewing. I see it being very quotable. There's a line it doesn't matter when it happens, but the line itself is very funny. There's cheerleaders outside a crime scene, and the police officers and coroners are wheeling out the body. And then the cheerleaders say, "They're bringing out the body! Yay!" And then they start cheering for it. And it's like, that's hysterical. But, what's the point of that? And again, that's kind of just like a different perspective as well on like celebrating death or, cheering for those that we've lost. I mean, there's a lot of little avenues into this, and I really appreciate the overt camp and absurdity in this film. So bravo, this is great. If you didn't like Long Legs, I hope that you find something in The Monkey to enjoy or at least laugh. That's really all I got for you guys. I liked it. I would like to see it again. Anybody wants to see it again? Let me know.
I should try. I really liked Osgood Perkins, Hans Gretel, which came out. I really liked like the stylized part of that. Does the monkey feel like stylized? I never saw Long Legs, so I'm not familiar with that one.
Long Legs, very stylized. And so weird and atmospheric and had like this, sort of fuzz to it, this distortion. But The Monkey is definitely not stylized to an era or like a, time or anything. It's set in 2016. And that is the year of the monkey. I guess probably most certainly correctly by the Chinese calendar. But it's definitely modern. There's a big scene where there is mass carnage, and all I could think in my, I guess post-COVID, ongoing COVID brain, I'm like, oh, okay, that could be COVID. I guess I feel like, perhaps now as a modern moviegoer, if we see any sort of like large scale loss of life, maybe our knee-jerk reaction is, oh, that could be like COVID. That could, be reminiscent of COVID. But no, it's very, very modern. And also Elijah Wood is in this. Undercover Heat, scene stealer, is hysterical. Could take an entire movie just of his character. That good. And Theo James actually acts his ass off. I think really the only complaint that I heard about this, because people kept saying, I'm hearing mixed reviews. That was the phrase. No one could tell me what the mixed review was. But there are these two child actors, and not everyone is a, Drew Barrymore, Dakota Fanning, just prodigy when it comes to being a child actor. But they deliver really great performances, and the kids are hysterical. They're really, you can tell that they're very serious and locked in, and they do a very good job. They do a very good job. So, The Monkey. Yeah.
No.
We'll go.
All right, I'm going to try to be quick with this one. I did want to give a shout out to this movie. I watched both of them recently. but this one was just playing in American like movie theaters, but which is significant, not just because you don't normally see Chinese movies playing in American movie theaters, but it's playing in American movie theaters after it made $2 billion in China, which is the largest an animated film has ever made in a single market in the history of movies, which I thought was somewhat significant. That movie is Naja 2. The first Naja, briefly, it came out in 2019, beautifully animated. But it tells this. It's a bit of a riff off of a Chinese folktale. You have I forgot what it was, like a meteor or something, but it was split into these two like circular objects. One was the demon pearl, which that's really bad, and the other one, I'm trying to think of what the other one was called. Where's the other movie? There's the demon pearl and the like ice something spirit seed. The spirit seed and the dip in the demon pill. The spirit seed is supposed to the folk tale is supposed to go where the spirit seed goes in the one child, the demon pill goes in the other child. The demon pill's causing chaos, and the spirit seed's going to be the light. And then after 3 years, they're going to fight, and then this insane lightning bolt's going to come out of the sky and like hit the demon pill kid like person and like kill them, and that's going to like create good years forever and ever. But of course there's like nefarious intentions, and the two things are swapped, and so the family that was expecting the spirit seed got the demon pill, and the spirit seed was taken to the dragons who have been cast underseas after they were bad at some point. I forgot this they were doing. And so like the plot of that movie is the family is trying to make this child named Naja, who is inhabited by the demon pill, to be good, even though he has the demon pill in him. And over the course of the movie, he finds this he finds the goodness in his heart and through his family, and ends up actually befriending the person who inhabits the spirit seed, and they become best buddies, and they fight off using their collective powers, fight off this lightning bolt that strikes. But then but they use all of their powers at the end of the first movie, and they're like bodies are gone, but they have like these souls that are just kind of hovering around. And so Naja 2 picks up right after the first one, and they're trying to find these bodies for the souls. Where Naja 1 is very much like a kind of somewhat of like he's a bad boy and he's doing all he's causing all this problems, and there's like a lot of humor that's more like kind of slapsticky stuff. Naja 2 is like wall-to-wall action. It's not a one-to-one comparison. It's kind of like the jump from Alien to Aliens, where it's just like one movie is this like slow contemplative horror movie that's like based on this kind of slow moving parts, and then the next one is like boom boom action James Cameron. This one, though it's directed by the same person, Naja 2 is very much like hardcore action. And the things, not to get too much into the plot in this one either, but like the things that this is probably one of the most like remarkably animated movies that I've ever seen in my life. Like the reason it caught my attention is a lot of people were talking online about it, and just talking about like what Pixar is doing, what Disney animation is doing, what even Spider-Verse is doing, which is probably the closest comparison to this you could make. But I feel like the animation in Naja and Naja 2 even outperform that. It has this like, it very much feels like it has this kind of like realistic quality to it. It has those kind of not necessarily uncanny valley, but like you have this kind of realism, almost like kind of like almost Final Fantasy video games and things like that, like the cutscenes that kind of have a different, like almost a better sheen of animation on it than like just the regular game. And it's you have this scene at the beginning where they're like moving the village is like moving water into the village, and it's kind of like that moment that I think we had a number of years ago with like The Good Dinosaur, where you're like, oh my gosh, this like look at how this water was animated. It looks so realistic, and this one like kind of takes that up like 10 notches. I also saw this in 3D. And the 3D really added that another element to it, where you just like the colors really vivid. It's a very colorful movie. It's constantly moving. You have this really like beautiful like paintbrush strokes of animation that are just moving left and right, and the action scenes there's like a scope to them. It doesn't feel like you're locked in this like narrow space. It feels like the world around the characters is like expansive, and you can feel that expansiveness. There's the kind of climactic fight takes place above, like it's just ocean. There's nothing else around it, and there's this giant item, this giant ball that's like hovering over the ocean, and you feel like the miles and miles and miles of like nothing around it, which kind of which makes the fight a little bit more digestible than like the fight in the first movie, which it feels like a Marvel fight to a degree, where you're just running through and just breaking all of these buildings and things like that. I really, I was incredibly impressed with it. I think I really want Michael, you to see this, because I think just as somebody who like watches a lot of animation and appreciates animation, I would be curious to hear like more of your thoughts on this. I think Andrew, if you're listening, I think you would be interested in this movie, in both of these movies. Nausea 1 is on Canopy and also on YouTube, and you can watch it for free on YouTube with some ads. Nausea 2 was just in theaters, but I think the first Nausea was on Netflix for a long time before moving off of it. So I'm sure Nausea 2 will make its way to streaming. Once it's out of theaters, and I've been hearing about it a little bit more. So it also might be one of those that kind of, I hope it could get into like the Oscar race for like animation next year or something like that. But yeah, check out Nausea 1 and 2. They're fantastic.
I'd really like to see them. I feel like, maybe I'm just ignorant of what things were like 20 years ago, but it does feel like recently that like China is putting more of an emphasis on like exporting its animation. Like you mentioned Netflix, and I know that there are a number of like Netflix, like animated films on Netflix that are from China. Like there's one called like The Great Fish, maybe, or something like that. I keep seeing recommended to me, but anyway, I don't know a ton about Chinese animation, so.
I don't either. And I don't know much about the studio. It didn't seem like the person who directed this directed these two movies had directed much before it. So I don't know. The second one is definitely a level up in animation, but the first one still is really cool looking.
Sweet.
So yeah. And then real quickly, we're way over time, but I saw Black Bag last night. It's opening in theaters on Friday when this episode drops. The newest Steven Soderbergh. I think it's known on the podcast, I'm a big Soderbergh head. This one stars Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett, and Tom Burke and a couple other British actors, Pierce Brosnan. And it's like this sleek espionage thriller that's like that has Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett playing this married couple who are intelligence agents but work on different sides of the kind of different sides of the room. And so Black Bag comes from this term that everybody uses where you go, hey, what were you up to Friday night? You go Black Bag, because it's, you can't really divulge it. But it's nice to see. Soderbergh one is just like, this is up there with like Kimmy for like just really sleek, strong thrillers lately. It's very good. And it's super sexy. Like Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett are really hot. They just kind of have like this hot, we have no kids, we're older, we have like a really cool house, we make good food, we're dressed amazingly, like just hot people energy. Super sexy movie. 10 out of 10 would recommend. So go see it in theaters this weekend.
Is he doing any sort of like stylistic thing, or is it just kind of a straight shooter? It's
a straight shooter. It's 90 minutes. And I there's a lot of camera stuff that I like in it, but it's not because he's doing anything like special. It's just dude knows how to work a camera. But yeah, I hope some folks see it before the next episode. I want to talk about it more. But Black Bag in theaters now. All right, we're gonna take a short break, and then we will be talking about Duck Soup in part 2 after this.
For our information, just for illustration, tell us how you intend to run the nation.
These are the laws of my administration. No one's allowed to smoke or tell a dirty joke, and whistling is forbidden. We're not allowed to tell a dirty joke. If chewing gum is chewed, the chewer is pursued, and in the hoosegow hidden. If we choose to chew, we'll be pursued. If any form of pleasure is exhibited, report to me and it will be prohibited. I'll put my foot down, so shall it be. This is the land of the free. The last man in.
All right, and we're back with part 2 of episode 496 of Cinematary. In this part, we'll be continuing our not young critics. But I was listening to young critics earlier today, so I'm screwed up.
We're too old. We're so old now.
We're too old now. Yeah.
Critics.
Our Cinematary Re-Dos with 1933's Duck Soup. This was I'm gonna let younger Zach. This is June 9th, 2017. Zach introing Duck Soup. It's directed by Leo McCarey with a script by Burt Calmer and Harry Ruby. And the film starred the Marx Brothers along with Margaret Dumont, Louis Colhern, Raquel Torres, and Edgar Kennedy. It was the final Marx Brothers film to feature Zeppo, who retired from acting after this movie and became an agent.
If I didn't know it was a Marx Brother, I don't think I would have thought it was a Marx Brother from watching.
No, he's kind of hidden compared to the others. The film is about I read Ebert's review before doing this, and he in his review he's like he talks about, kind of explain the plot is not really worth anything, but here it goes. When the tiny nation of Fredonia goes bankrupt, its wealthy benefactor Mrs. Teasdale insists that the wacky Rufus T. Firefly, played by Groucho Marx, becomes the country's president. Sensing a weakness in leadership, the bordering nation of Sylvania sends in the spies Pinky, played by Harpo, and Ciccolini, played by Chico Marx, to set the stage for a revolution. As Firefly clashes with the Sylvanian ambassador, plenty of mayhem ensues in the country's verge on an all-out war. Compared to the Marx Brothers' previous Paramount films, Duck Soup was a box office disappointment, although it was not a flop as it is sometimes reported. The film opened to mixed reviews, although this by itself did not end the group's business with Paramount. Bitter contract disputes, including the threatened walkout by the brothers, crippled relationships between them and Paramount just as Duck Soup went into production. After the film fulfilled their 5-picture contract with the studio, the Marxes and Paramount agree to part ways. One possible reason for the film's lukewarm response is that it was released during the Great Depression. Audiences were taken aback by such preposterous political disregard, buffoonery, and cynicism at a time of economic and political crisis. Most critics at the time disliked it because of its, quote, dated look at politics. Some modern critics are also unimpressed. Christopher Noll believes, quote, the send-up of Mussolini types doesn't quite pan out. Take the comedy, leave the story. Even Groucho himself did not initially think too highly of the film. When asked of the significance of the film's politics, Groucho only shrugged and said, quote, what significance? We were just 4 Jews trying to get a laugh.
He also refused the Les Blanc title too. So that
I will. I got that in. Do you want to trust me to do my notes?
No, you're good. I was just commenting on your notes.
Okay. Nevertheless, the brothers were ecstatic when Benito Mussolini took the film as a personal insult and banned it in Italy. Also, the residents of Fredonia, New York, protested because they feared that the similar-sounding nation would hurt their city's reputation. The Marx Brothers took the opposite approach, telling them to change the name of their town to keep from hurting their movie. In the movie, there's one of the more famous scenes is the mirror scene. In this scene, Pinky, dressed as Firefly, pretends to be Firefly's reflection in a missing mirror, matching his every move, including absurd ones that begin out of sight to near perfection. In one particularly surreal moment, the two men swap positions, and thus the idea of which is a reflection of the other. Eventually, into their misfortune, Ciccolini, also disguised as Firefly, enters the frame and collides with both of them. Although its appearance in Duck Soup is the best known instance, the concept of the mirror did not originate in this film. Max Linder included in 7 Years Bad Luck in 1921, where a man's servants have accidentally broken a mirror in an attempt to hide the fact by imitating his actions in the mirror's frame. Charlie Chaplin used a similar joke in 1916's The Floor Walker, though it did not involve a mirror. The scene has also been imitated many times, including in a Bugs Bunny cartoon, Hair Tonic, the Mickey Mouse cartoon, Lonesome Ghost, The Square Peg, in the movie The Square Peg, in the movie The Pink Panther, and in Big Business. Harpo himself did a reprise of this scene dressed in his usual costume, with Lucille Ball also donning the fright wig and trench coat in the I Love Lucy episode Lucy and Harpo Marx. The climactic production number ridicules war by comparing nationalism to a minstrel show. In another scene, the film pokes fun at the Hays Code. Due to the code, a man and woman could not be shown in bed together. The camera begins the scene in a woman's bedroom, panning across the foot of the bed. A pair of men's shoes are shown on the floor, then a pair of women's shoes are shown on the floor, and then 4 horseshoes. The camera cuts to a shot of the entire room, with Pinky sleeping in one bed with the horse while the woman is in another bed.
I was hoping you would give me an explanation of what was going on in that scene, Zach.
Yes. Initially, before the movie, the film that would later become Duck Soup, initially the Marx Brothers wanted to make a movie following their previous one, and they were going to have Ernst Lubitsch direct it, which sounds interesting. Leo McCarey came up with the idea for the title the title Duck Soup from some of his Laurel and Hardy films, including Animal Crackers, Monkey Business, and Horse Feathers. Duck Soup was American English slang at that time. It meant something easy to do. Conversely, to duck something meant to avoid it. When Groucho was asked for an explanation of the title, he quipped, quote, "Take 2 turkeys, 1 goose, 4 cabbages, but no duck, and mix them together. After one taste, you'll duck soup for the rest of your life." In 2000, Roger Ebert said about the movie, "The Marx Brothers created a body of work in which individual films are like slices from the whole, but Duck Soup is probably the best." All right. On that note, Duck Soup. How did y'all like me getting a little testy with Andrew there?
Well, he's not here to defend himself, but
It's like watching Before Midnight when they fight. It's breaks my heart, Zach.
you guys don't fight. You're scaring the children.
Yeah. No, I was listening to that today, and I was like, oh, like I had a little clause there for Andrew. I try not to do that. We're good. But I got a clip from me talking, and then one from Andrew talking in Duck Soup. But before we hear what younger Andrew and I thought, I'm curious, Grace and Michael, what y'all thought of the movie.
Well, do you want to? Okay. This is a childhood staple of mine. I was obsessed with the Marx Brothers from a very young age. I used to go to Blockbuster with my grandmother, and she would let me rent a movie, and it would be either The Thin Man or Night at the Opera. So
that is such a chaotic thing for. How old were you?
Like 7, 8, 9, and probably at like age 11 or 12, I was Santa for Christmas got me the Marx Brothers box set. So this has been in my life. Wow. All my life.
Thank you.
And it's I think I owe it so much of my quippy wittiness, but who's to say, really? But this is one of those movies that it's great to grow up with, because I remember laughing at all of the obvious, very funny physical comedy jokes, the faces, the musical numbers. And then as you start to age, you kind of catch on to, of course, the, less overt, humor and the more adult themes there. And then again, as you grow and you become more conscious and more aware, you start to realize, oh, this is a political satire. I don't know anything about political satire as a 7 or 8 year old, but, a little older, you start to become aware. And I think that that's what allows this movie to, gives it its longevity, is that not only has it lasted so long, but people get, a lot of mileage out of something like this. This is, we had our silent movie here in the Redo, Man with the film camera. And silence, silent comedies are something completely different. And then vaudeville acts, Broadway acts, they get this second life because now people can hear the jokes. And what better jokes than the Marx Brothers? I could go on about, I could just drop. I just know a lot about the Marx Brothers. That's not really important.
It was.
But
I was gonna say it was really interesting listening back to the previous episode we did, and it was me and Andrew, and then John McAmis, who was on a number of Cinematary episodes early on, and Jessica Carr, and John and Andrew they were kind of going back and forth comparing like Chaplin and Keaton and like those movies to like the Marx Brothers.
you can't do that.
Yeah. And I'll play my clip, but it's a little bit of like it's apples and oranges over here. They're both comedians, but it's one's more like doing like verbal play and one's doing actual like physical play. But actually, that seems like a good segue. Hold on. Here's what Zach had to say. I mean, there's a story, there's a through line kind of going around, but really it's just it kind of works as almost these little small slices. I kind of think of them. It reminds me a lot of how they like structure episodes of the TV show Portlandia, where it's just these kind of bizarre, crazy characters, and there's a little bit of a through line going, but it's mainly just these little small slices that have moments, and then they move on to the next slice. And Duck Soup is structured that way, where you have these actors who are like presenting the story and trying to do this very somewhat serious the serious narrative about this country being bankrupt and needing to find new leadership, and you have this other country that's kind of trying to jump in on that country's weakness and use it for their advantage. And then you have just the Marx Brothers just disrupting that completely. And I love that whenever Rufus D. Firefly shows up, you do have those rapid fire lines, but that works because it just completely discombobulates whatever you were doing. It's just him shooting line after line after line. And then Harpo and Chico have the same effect, where they show up and they show up at the little stand where they're selling the peanuts and lemonade and such, and they're just doing something, like they're just constantly doing something, and it's something happening over and over again. He's clipping something, he's kicking something, they're saying something, they're bopping something. There's just something always happening, and it's just I think that the movie works as just this. You have this kind of thin story that's constantly being interrupted by these by these disruptors. Michael messaged our chat about the movie, and I thought it was a perfect kind of explanation of what Duck Soup is. And it's 10 minutes of like setting up the narrative, and then it's 60 minutes of a fire hose of jokes.
So good.
Yeah. Michael, what do you think of Duck Soup?
I mean, I've seen this movie several times. I don't think I was quite as young as you, Grace, when I was introduced to the Marx Brothers, but I was probably in middle school or something. My dad would bring movies from Blockbuster, and sometimes he'd let us pick the movie, but sometimes he would pick a movie. And I remember he brought home A Night at the Opera once, which went over real well with us in the family. I thought for a long time, I thought that was my favorite Marx Brothers movie. And for some reason, when he brought home Duck Soup, though, that did not go over well. I remember thinking, oh, Duck Soup is not as good as A Night at the Opera. And I don't really know what I was thinking. I think maybe A Night at the Opera is a more coherent movie when you're interested in plot and stuff. And so maybe that's what I was latching onto. But there's really no beating. Just this movie just doesn't stop. I don't know, like just you bringing up the lemonade stand guy, like every single moment with that lemonade stand guy is so funny, including I had totally forgotten the horse gag was connected to the lemonade stand guy.
Yeah.
Oh no, when he's in the tub.
Yeah.
Well, so he's in the tub, but then he's also he's getting with the lemonade stand guy's wife, right? And then he brings the horse in, and then there's the horse gag. Like, I don't know, like I think back when I think of A Night at the Opera, which has been a while since I saw A Night at the Opera. I think of like a few big set pieces, like the stateroom scene. I think is like the big one where like more and more people just keep entering the room. But when I think of Duck Soup, there's not a single moment that alone stands out. It's like I just keep thinking about, oh yeah, there was that part, and there's that other part, and there's that other part. It's like a movie that like I just every time I return to, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about this part. It's so good.
When you first meet Rufus D. Firefly, I just love like they set up the whole fanfare, and then he's like late twice, and then he hit the alarm bell, and he goes down the thing, and but I also love like then he just starts like it's like a machine gun of jokes.
Just haranguing that woman too, yeah.
Margaret Dumont, who is always the best part of any Marx Brothers movie because she just rolls with it and takes it. And plays it off so well. But he has like one line where he's just like, "Will you marry me? Did your husband leave you any money?" Answer the second first. And he's just like, and it's just like he comes in and he just comes in like firing hot. And it doesn't really stop. Yeah, it doesn't really stop because then you even when you bring in Chico and Harpo, like. They walk in and they have like the masks on, and then the phone rings and they just like jet in the room, and it's just like constant, like again they're like cutting and they're like bopping and they're like knocking his thing out. Like it's just I love it. It's amazing.
The thing that got me is when they're like they keep picking up the phone that isn't ringing, and Chico's like, "Don't worry, it's spy stuff." They're just like,
the thing that got me every time is when Harpo would bring out his lighter and he'd be like, "You gotta light," and he's just like, you just have the open,
flamethrower.
You just have the open flame, and the guy's like he's using it to light the guy's cigar.
That he then cuts off like 30 seconds later.
Yeah,
I'd forgotten how scissor happy Harpo is throughout the film.
He can wield those any which way he wants. This movie is like the last of their like vaudeville acts that they had done. You know, before this, it's Animal Crackers, the Coconuts. And then when they leave Paramount and go to MGM, they have like Irving Thalberg, who's like, pumps in this, sympathetic storyline and more cohesive storyline. I was just thinking about what you were saying with, Night at the Opera.
Here's like the Zeppo insert in that movie, right? Because that's not in the film, but
he's not in it because he becomes a talent agent with the other Marx Brothers. Gummo is not the Herman Corinne movie, but the other brother. And so from there, he's not in there. So then they have to like write in the straight character because they don't have a straight man once he leaves. And he never wanted to be an actor. He hated it. He just had to be there to round out the numbers because their mom was like a stage mom. Minnie, I should be Great Show Marx.
Great Show Marx.
Great Show Marx.
You gotta paint the mustache on.
I already have like, very prominent glasses and hair. So I think that,
you're natural.
Halfway there. But this being like the last, in the vaudeville style, and it's them firing on all cylinders, I think it makes it extra special. It is kind of hard to pick out a favorite moment or a favorite joke. And then with the politics being so overt, I was reading the Marx Brothers scrapbook, and it's just like interview series with Groucho. And at 84, he's like, I credit all the, politics to Leo, to the director. And he also says that he's the one that came up with the mirror scene. So
yes,
Leo, have you learned much about Leo McCarey, who made some incredible comedy movies back in the day? Also was just a torturous drunk.
No, I didn't hear about that. Groucho just said that he, was a
he was great because he also he like directs a lot of Marx Brothers movies. He directs a lot.
He did The Awful Truth with Cary Grant.
He does some Cary Grant movies. He does Ruggles of Red Gap. As a favorite of the podcast. But then he also does Make Way for Tomorrow, which
the least Marx Brothers movie of all time.
The least comedy movie that you could ever think of. Wild Career. Terrible.
Wild.
Let's real quickly. Let's listen. With I know Andrew's not here, but let's hear what he had to say.
He watched to a subtitle.
Ooh,
And that was a good decision.
yeah.
And I still think that because there are so many jokes, sometimes it feels just like a series of jokes as opposed to a narrative characters, right? And I think that how much this movie is going to work for you is determined by what percentage of the jokes land with you.
Yeah.
Because half of them might land and then the other half might just completely not.
Groucho just like throws out a net, like grab a fire and see what he can catch from the audience.
So overall, in this Young Critics Watch Old Movies series, we're kind of talking about how well these movies age for us and whether or not we enjoy them with so many years past. So what are our thoughts? I would give thumbs up to Duck Soup. I think that maybe it's not as perfect of a comedy as it could have been because of how much it relies on the dialogue, right? And how your mileage is kind of going to vary depending on how many of the jokes you pick up or how many of them work for you. But I really get time with it. Especially the musical numbers and especially some of the visual gags. So
I think it's certainly one of these great kind of famous American films that if you haven't seen, it's certainly worthwhile to watch.
And not a hard watch.
No.
Either. Yeah, it's only really easily digested.
An hour and 9 minutes. Anyone can watch that.
It might be. I mean, I know that it is taught in a lot of intro film classes at University of Tennessee, and I can understand why. It's a super accessible, super old movie.
I just like that last line. Super accessible, super old movie.
Put that on the cover.
Sometimes when you play these Andrew clips, I kind of like hold my breath because it's like, what's he gonna say? He has matured and grown, and I'm glad to agree with most of what he said. However, he said that he liked the musical numbers in this. Meanwhile, we know that he hates musicals and he hated Singing in the Rain.
Caught in a lie.
This was post Singing in the Rain too.
Well, it's interesting.
Maybe Singing in the Rain planted the seeds that flower as we watch Duck Soup.
Yeah. And also, what does he mean? Not a great as comedy as it could have been.
I would like to know what of this movie should be changed to be funnier because it's
I think
so
what he was saying. Was that when they were having the conversation comparing silent comedy versus early sound era comedy? So from like silent to verbal sparring. Okay, so see, that's what it is.
I think the only comparison to be made is that both Chaplin and the Marx Brothers have the funny guy have a funny mustache. So that's all we got. That's all we need, really.
I feel like we need to like get Andrew in like on a call in, like we're a talk radio show. And
Caller, what's your problem?
listen, it was almost 10 years ago at this point.
No, we can't hold him to that.
I'm gonna right your wrongs.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of tough to talk about Duck Soup without just like naming off all the different gags that you like. But at the same time, that's what I appreciate most about it. Like today was a rough day. I did not have a good day today. But then it was like, well, I'm about to go home and I'm gonna watch Duck Soup, and that definitely helped the day. I feel like it might be to me if you were like you have to name the best comedy movie of all time. I might like consider a few, but I think at the end I would probably go with Duck Soup. I don't see how you can get much better than this.
I think a lot about when I was young, I watched so many Looney Tunes, like Chuck Jones and all of those things. And I think in a lot of ways, I mean, people talk all the time about like live action comedy, but the trio, Harpo, Chico, and Groucho kind of all seem to have like megazorded together to make Bugs Bunny early in terms of inspiration. And like I think that like has really set like what I like to see in movie comedies, because you've got like the physical comedy, especially from Harpo. You've got like the like goofy mean, I know it's like an ethnic caricature, so but
Delaney, he's trying to learn Italian so that he goes to Italy one night.
Practice the language.
My grandmother was half Italian, so I maybe I get a pass on this one. But at any rate, but like I don't know, there's just something so like perfectly calibrated to like what I like and find funny in movies through these three principal characters, and
Yeah.
I just can't imagine like there are movies that capture essences of this and maybe in more sustained forms. Like you talk about like the Pink Panther, and I don't think the Pink Panther as a movie is that funny, but the sequel, Shot in the Dark, is very funny. And that has more like the gags are more patient and they're allowed to kind of play out more. But they all still have their roots in like the sorts of things that this movie is doing. And in a way, like this movie is like a sampler of all the things that I find funny, and I get little tastes of all of them. And that's great.
It's interesting thinking about this as well, like in a more modern sense, because I think the essence of Duck Soup is very similar to the essence of a lot of comedies that we get today in terms of like improv, because it's all like kind of jokes bouncing off people. I don't think that there was an improv, in the state that it's in now, like at that point in time. But it's like Groucho is even though this is written jokes, I feel like it has like the essence of improv where he's working off of people. That's why him and Margaret Dumont are so good, because she like she is just this like the consummate like straight person to all of his wild things. And so like there was a part of the podcast, the previous podcast, we talked a little bit about, Andrew mentioned that, he thinks that a lot more comedies have taken from the Marx Brothers over like Chaplin comedies. And I would agree with that, just because, with improv and like SNL and UCB and those places, like really kind of taking a dominance in the kind of comedy space, not just for movies, but for TV as well. And even like on TikTok and things like that, like they do translate really well to today.
I think also that like in terms of comedy, like when I think of like kind of the main comedic voices of the last like 20, 30 years, a lot of it's on television, and the pace of television comedy, like when you think of kind of like The Simpsons or 30 Rock or something like that, that is the pace of Duck Soup. Like Duck Soup is maybe a little bit faster, but like that, like let's try to cram as many jokes into like a 22-minute episode as we can. Like that feels very much in the spirit of what Duck Soup is doing, as opposed to like a lot of Chaplin films are you set up a premise in a scene and you allow that scene to like do permutations on that premise for a while, which is like very fun and engaging, but it's not quite what like modern comedy does. And I don't know, it's good.
Grace?
Yeah, I think because more modern comedy has this sort of feeling of like people just in a space, almost in a circle, and then just firing back at each other. Like silent comedy, like you said, Michael, sets up the space, the permutations of the visual language of comedy. And then Marx Brothers incorporate plenty of physical comedy and silent comedy, shtick when it comes to space and face, their facial expressions, the physicality that they do. And I feel like modern comedy is just, you listen to it and you laugh. They don't, there's not enough, sight work, gag work.
We got to bring the faces back.
I could not stop dying. I think one of my favorite bits in this is he's playing jacks and you just hear the thump and the thump and the thump and what is it? And he's playing jacks. And every time he catches, a handful, he does that sweet sort of like look up innocent, oh, little old me. And then when he misses it and he punches it out of there and he knocks him out of there. I mean, like to just, completely tear that scene apart. And then, all right, here, here's the actual thing that we're here for, which is this Parliament Senate meeting. Okay. Call to order, enough joking around, guys. Let's get serious. Like those, switches. I mean, that scene change is just from one person to his prop. And then it opens up to the rest of, the ensemble there. There's not enough of that in modern comedy. It's, I also feel like modern stand-up is just a lot of crowd work. I mean, like, nobody is like telling good jokes and then like, in a space and using the space to, service that joke.
Yeah, I agree. I also meant by the faces, like, I don't know, we got to bring back distinctive faces. Like, let's get those weirdos out there. Like, I don't know.
Robert Pattinson does a good job of that.
Robert Pattinson actually, he does a very good job. And I mean, we got some of those folks there. But like, I mean, the Marx Brothers are like three of the greatest like movie faces ever. And throughout the history of movies, I think like you have your sex symbol actors, which I think are kind of like the dominant mode that like actors are working in right now. They're very photogenic actors, but most of the very memorable actors that we have in film history have these like incredible expressive faces that aren't necessarily beautiful in the in the kind of photographic way, but like are just terrific at communicating. I mean, we just lost Gene Hackman. I mean, what that's another incredible face. And I think that just the contours of the Marx Brothers faces and how they play them, those are never their like loudest gags, but like all three of them, I'm sorry, Zeppo, but all three of them, how
you don't want to be included in it anyway.
Yeah, they're so conscious of their face's relationship to the camera. I had forgotten how often Groucho talks to the camera in this film, but even when they're not, like, just terrific like physical work just from their faces. I love that.
I'm just thinking, I love the gag at the very end of the movie when they're at war and you keep cutting to different scenes and Groucho has a new American military outfit on.
And finally he's got like a Davy Crockett like coonspin cap on and
yeah. It's such a subtle, like they never like point your attention to it, but it's such a stupid gag that just goes on over the course. I forgot the different like outfits.
He's in Custer's outfit at one point. Not stars.
It's just stupid, and I love it. Yeah, I just the only thing that I feel like can kind of get. I don't know. It's tough to like nail comedies. I think The Simpsons is especially like early Simpsons is probably the closest we get to it. I get that energy from Bottoms a couple years ago, which also like incorporates a lot of like just kind of uses the planes of the scene to play around with jokes and sight gags and things like that. I mean, we talked in our Best of the Year episode about Hundreds of Beavers, which is very is directly influenced by like Looney Tunes and things like that. But yeah, I think not only like the faces, but also just like the sight and physical gags, like it's lost. I think it's gotten a little bit better, but we had that kind of like Judd Apatow, let's get a bunch of people in a room improving comedy for a while. That just is like, I watch it now and it's so boring.
Yeah, I will say that like actually one thing that came to mind is while watching Duck Soup is the comedy that was kind of ascendant before Judd Apatow, because like Judd Apatow at the time was kind of fresh because the comedies that were before it, so like Austin Powers or like all the Adam Sandler movies or whatever, actually were kind of Marx Brothers-y in the sense of like that horse gag is 100% like could be in an Adam Sandler film. And like I think part of it was that for whatever reason, by like the turn of the millennium, like people had found the really highly constructed element of that like stale or passe, and liked the kind of, oh, it feels like these are real people, you could sit down and have a beer with Seth Rogen or whatever, but you wouldn't do that with Austin Powers. Like, I don't know, like the kind of this people found appealing. And I think like ultimately that just had diminishing returns. Like,
you're right. I rewatched all three Austin Powers relatively recently, and those are great.
Yeah, I don't know. They're so funny.
The first one when he like wakes up and he's just like he's like, oh yeah, comrades, and they're like, oh no, Austin, we won the war, and he's like, oh, capitalism, yeah.
Yeah.
It has a good mix. But yeah, any final thoughts on Duck Soup?
Speaking of stupid but it's funny anyway, one thing that kept getting me is every time Harpo like will put his leg over something and then just like let it go limp. I don't know what that gag
having to hold the legs, like when he kept handing him the leg at the popcorn stand or the peanut stand.
It's so funny. Like, I don't know. Like, where do you even keep it? Like, what if I put my leg in your hand and it went limp? Like, I don't know, but it's so funny how it like plays out.
Yeah,
I love that.
And then like in that bit, Chico does it once, and he's just like, "What are you doing?" Yeah. Grace, any final thoughts on Duck Soup?
I can't wait to watch this for the rest of my life. I'm so glad this was made. I wish that more comedy was like Duck Soup or Coconuts or Animal Crackers or Monkey Business, or, you know, give us more Marx Brothers. I think Danny McBride is kind of taking us there. We'll see.
Fair. I like Horse Feathers as well. Where
Horse Feathers is good. That's the elephant. That's got the elephant line, right? Isn't that in Horse Feathers?
That's the elephant. That was in this one, but
that's in this one. I for sure thought the elephant in my pajamas was in Duck Soup.
No, that's in Animal Crackers.
Oh dang!
When he's Captain Spaulding, we can do that later.
Yeah.
But no, phenomenal. Can't get enough. I'm still laughing.
Yeah, honestly, like one of the best. Like I said, possibly the best comedy ever done. All right, it's time to spin.
Oh, here we go.
So looking at our spinner, we got 3 episodes left before 500. Real quickly, what is it? March 3rd, 8 p.m. at Central Cinema. We're locked in for that date. I forgot.
Do you mean May 3rd?
March 3rd.
May 3rd.
First, get in your time machine.
I missed it.
May 3rd, excuse me. May 3rd, 8 p.m. Central Cinema. Episode 500. We'll talk about we'll watch a movie, which I think we'll announce pretty soon. We'll talk about the movie, and then we'll probably go through more clips of old episodes to make Andrew and I cringe and things like that. But anyway, so we got 3 episodes left. We got Mulholland Drive, Life and Times of Colonel Blimp, and Stagecoach. Let's see what we got.
Click to spin.
Ooh, Colonel Blimp!
Oh, yay!
Colonel Blimp! Yeah!
I love the applause that plays after the spin. It's an amazing feature of this little spin widget.
I love the spin widget.
It's not the widget, it's the audience.
That's true.
Yeah, our enormous crowd that listens to us each time. Cinematary is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
I'm very excited. I really love Colonel Blimp. I think I'm excited to kind of dig back into the Archers again. We did a whole Powell and Pressburger series, and I'm going to watch the documentary that Martin Scorsese just made. That's out on Canopy now. Shout out Canopy.
Shout out to Canopy. I've actually never seen Colonel Blimp, so maybe this will be the first time.
It's good. All right. Thanks. That'll wrap it up for this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Instagram at @Cinematary and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary. We list all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Patreon.com/Cinematary if you would like to support the show. It's getting close to time where we got to pay the bills for the website and all that stuff. So thanks for
that. We need Mrs. Teasdale and her $20 million.
We do. We need Mrs. Teasdale.
Look, we can make Groucho the president of Cinematary. I think we had in favor of that.
We'll have Rufus T. Firefly will be the president of Cinematary. I think it'll be great. But thank you to our patrons, Cam, Ron Hayes, Tanner Huskins, Risa Marsathi, and Tyler Chandler. We appreciate your patronage. As you saw, next week, we got the Life and Times of Colonel Blimp. Until next time, thanks for listening.